one of the comments on our YouTube was, Dante, you the psychopath. So like, how do you feel? I mean, you're talking about, white supremacy in a very direct way. Oftentimes people are then spinning it and saying like, you're the racist. You're the one who needs to be quiet, right? You're the one whose speech needs to be infringed on. Like, so how do you respond to somebody that feels like, that what you're saying about white supremacy, even though you back it with history and facts, is in fact racist? What up? This week in White Supremacy, live from Tulsa, Oklahoma. White Privilege Conference number 25. We're here. We're back. We've been to Black Wall Street. We're feeling the power of our ancestors. My name is Jasiri X. I'm co-founder and CEO of One Hood Media, and to my immediate right,
it's a miracle.
It's your girl, Miracle. Big blessing, aka the only reason why y'all watch this podcast.
Miracle's been signing autographs, all conference.
I'm just here enjoying Tulsa for the first time.
Yes, absolutely. And my brother, you were awarded the most popular authentic black man in Tulsa, right? I saw that on your social media.
It's your boy Trouble Nonetheless, Never Like Supremacy. We here.
Niggas love South, maybe?
Is this the South? This is
maybe
Midwest.
one day. Maybe one day.
No, this is the South, bro. It's Oklahoma, man.
I thought this was the Midwest.
Well, sir, how are you? And who are you today?
Supreme Asiatic Intelligently Divine, Farouk Al-Said.
Farouk on the board today. Make it happen. And we're rejoined.
Yeah.
By our
favorite
brother.
guest of all time.
Yes. Oh, wow. Favorite guest. The Black academic himself.
Yeah.
Dante King. What's up, brother? Dante, how you doing, sir?
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be back with you.
Absolutely. And you are somebody who, because I think of your directness and the way you speak about, you trigger a lot of white people, right? You trigger them. You had a video go viral on Twitter where you broke down, and I mean, you put in your book, right? The whites are psychopaths.
Jesus.
And one of the comments on our YouTube was, Dante, you the psychopath. So like, how do you feel? I mean, you're talking about, white supremacy in a very direct way. Oftentimes people are then spinning it and saying like, you're the racist. You're the one who needs to be quiet, right? You're the one whose speech needs to be infringed on. Like, so how do you respond to somebody that feels like, that what you're saying about white supremacy, even though you back it with history and facts, is in fact racist?
Right. So thanks for the question. Thanks again for having me back. I think that trying to get people who are sick to understand that they are sick is a very challenging feat.
Yes.
It's an extremely challenging task to begin with. And so it's almost like trying to get Adolf Hitler to admit that he slaughtered Jewish people,
right,
and that he was sociopathic and that he was a monster and treacherous towards them.
Yes.
And I think to understand the development of whiteness, white identity, both at the individual level as well as a collective group of people, a collective organization, and people who have been organized on the premise of their whiteness, is to understand that they have been socialized on foundations of terrorism, and that inherent within their identity, they're set up to do harm against non-white people, because everything that they affirm themselves by that is underlined by a Eurocentric standard or a Eurocentric measure that makes them right, that makes them superior, that makes their culture right and everything in it, is inherently anti-non-white,
yes,
and most severely anti-black. And so even as we sit here and we have discussions, for example, around statistics that say that black people are not proficient in reading. Well, we're talking about the English language, and we're talking about a Eurocentric standard that we're using to try to measure African proficiency.
Right.
That was never set up and arranged for us. And so Dr. Bobby Wright calls it menticide, that we're suffering from menticide, because
yes,
we've created a positive relationship out of white standards, white cultural ideals, and we use them to ascribe value to ourselves and to other people.
I have a question for you.
Wow.
When this happens, when you have these conversations, right, and you say these things, do white people ever come up to you and be like, I hear you, but not me?
Most white people, when I have these conversations at the individual level, they understand it.
Oh, I thought you was about to say
Yeah,
they
me
be
too.
out.
I thought that was about to go someplace completely different.
I had a conversation with a white doctor on a plane. I was traveling from Vegas to California, and he said, you know, everything that you've described to me in your book, and even the passages that you shared about white people being pathological, he says, I've said this for years. We are pathological. And the very fact that they exist within a culture where they've stolen everything from other people, and yet they call it discovery, right? So they discovered America, they discovered all of these things, right? Dr. Aruna Kilanani, she gave a talk at Yale. She talked about the psychopathology of whiteness, and she talked about, you know, how they discovered vegetarianism, they discovered yoga. Everything
I say that all the time. White people take responsibility for yoga more than anyone.
Everything is a discovery, but it's all stolen.
Come on,
And then
bro.
even the language that they use, that they abide by, and that they hold us accountable to, all made up, right? And so they themselves live within, exist upon delusion. They live within their own white delusions, and they're in denial about it because they don't understand their history. Many of them don't care to know it or care to study it to understand how we've gotten here. And so therefore, when you ask the question, you know, how do you respond to people who don't understand what you're saying or who are averse to it or have challenges understanding it? They have to investigate themselves. They have to begin to investigate their own psychology, their own cultural norms, everything that makes them who they are. And I think Toni Morrison, along with others, Dr. Alvin Poussin, she said it best. She says, if you can only be tall because somebody else is on their knees, then you have a serious problem, right? And so white identity, the very basis of it is that they are superior to other people.
Yes.
And so why does one need that? Why does one need that in order to have value and profess that there is something unique or special about them?
This is why you're my favorite guest,
it
I think we're all
reminds me.
in love with you.
Yeah,
yeah.
It reminds me of when Juneteenth came and people was like, oh, Juneteenth is a made up holiday. And like Dr. Mark Lamont Hill was like, all holidays are made up.
Right.
Like your holidays that you celebrate, somebody made those up. So the idea, you're so delusional, you can't even see that. And like, because this was black people, some celebrate black people, you're saying that's made up. No, they're all made up. Like they're holidays. And so like, what gives validity to the one you made up? Is it because it's rooted in whiteness and white supremacy and you deem it special, but it doesn't mean it's not as made up as everything else?
I got a question.
Right.
Okay. Boom.
My question is, because I know that these conversations that you have stir up a lot of tension in, you know, audiences that you've sat in front of. And my question to you is like, your comfortability in the face of tension, was that something that you had to develop, or is that something that like you've always had?
I had to develop it over time. And I think the more experiences that we go through, especially as black people, as a black man in this place called America, that is been formed in ways that are just hostile to my identity, that's averse to black people, that is just inherently anti-black, I had to develop it. Because the place where I really am also trying to get to is to compel black people to begin to understand how we've ingested the psychopathology as well, how we exist within and ascribe to the white delusion just as much as white people. And so, for example, when we use white institutions to ascribe value to ourselves and each other, right? Everything from the grading system to the grades that we get in education to white capitalism. You know, you don't really have worth and your life does not matter unless you are doing well by white standards and by white measures of success. The problem with that is when the culture has been set up to affirm white people using these institutions, these norms and ideals, and they've also been set up to create an orientation of disenfranchisement and a derogatory orientation around people who don't perform well by these white standards. And it's mostly always or all of the time black people, Black people are dispositioned and situated at the bottom of every statistic. We are inherently programmed to see black people as less than and deficient based on white standards. And so what I tell black people is stop trying to hold yourself accountable in a culture to standards and ideals that white people are never held accountable for.
True.
They're not held accountable for these standards. They can be deficient, they can be insufficient, they can be mediocre, and they will still reap an abundance of reward. Meanwhile, I'm around here and I'm trying to compete to prove that I'm just as good, if not better, than some mediocre person that doesn't have to perform.
Right.
It's a process of dehumanization. I'm dehumanizing myself in the process in pursuit of greatness, of trying to be great within a construct that deems me insufficient at every turn, no matter how well I do. Meanwhile, Tom and Becky get the benefit of the doubt of cultural beliefs, of cultural affirmations. They benefit from the benefit of the doubt of being able to wear, for example, in their identity, the belief that they have potential and are capable people.
Right.
There's no way to compete with that.
Before they even open their mouth, just based on how they look and the color of their skin. And to me, no greater representation of that is Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
The fact that a man with 91 felonies could go out talking about law and order.
Talk about it.
The fact that somebody who's had multiple wives and multiple affairs can be embraced by the evangelical Christian community and not only say the Bible is his favorite book, but actually literally sell Bibles.
Yes.
This man is selling Bibles during Easter week. And that's not looked at as in a negative way. That's looked at, oh, he's going to be the savior to uphold these American ideals. So if he's the person that's upholding American ideals, it shows you how perverse those ideals have to be in the first place.
But can we take it a step further?
Please do.
The fact that he is ill-equipped to do anything, the fact that there's no nuance there, that he can't string together 5 to 7 coherent sentences to form a nuanced, thorough, thoughtful paragraph. The fact that he mispronounces words.
Yes.
The fact that he has not demonstrated.
I have the best words. I know all the words.
And everything is either a lot or big. There's no nuance there ever. And the fact that he was able to become president of the United States.
Is that an indictment on America or on Donald Trump?
Absolutely. It's an indictment on everything that America values because, again, he is the representative of white deficiency. He is the representation of white mediocrity. And the way that everyday white people get to benefit from white affirmative action because that's what America's institutions were founded upon. That's what they exist upon. And so we have to understand that Trump then is a prime example of not just white mediocrity, but the ways that white people can be sponsored in order to get these positions. You don't have to be great. You don't even have to know your job.
True.
He doesn't even know government.
Correct.
And he beat out someone that had not even just multiple years of experience in government, but who had been an attorney, who had been Secretary of State, who was by white institutional standards well qualified based on merit. This man came along and obliterated everything because that is the value of whiteness. That's the value of maleness. It's the value of white celebrity, of white positionality. He represents everything America values. And so why then do I, as an everyday black person, why am I then going to have a belief in American ideals and hold myself to standards that this person did not have to meet or achieve at all, and then try to measure my self-worth and yours and yours and your value based on how well you perform and achieve? And we have an example, a representative that says that you don't have to perform or achieve if you have white skin. That all of it is a process of dehumanization. And we're trained, as Dr. Caretha Mitchell says, to bring out substantially high standards when the person is not a straight white man. We're trained to do that.
True.
And so me holding Miracle to these ideals and expecting her, she's got 2 master's degrees, you need to get a PhD. Well, she didn't get a double master's degree. And meanwhile, someone like Tim Wise, who I like, he does this work, he has a bachelor's degree only. And that white man has gone around this country doing race work, writing books and speaking.
Yes.
And did not have to demonstrate his pedigree in terms of achievement and going to get advanced education.
Wow. Damn, that was powerful.
And I also believe like these past 6 months have really showed us how many people actually believe the work and this anti-racist framework when you're actually fighting for humanity. And you talked a little bit about the dehumanization process. So I want to move the trajectory a little bit over and talk about how do we reclaim our Blackness and our humanity, and how are we as Black people able to create a foundation where we can learn, grow, make mistakes, be soft, and extend grace to each other in a world where we're taught really to dehumanize each other and strive to meet these standards set forth by white supremacy.
I just love you. I first want to say that.
Oh, me
my
too.
sister.
It's a miracle.
So we first have to relinquish or recreate our relationship to this place. So Black people, stop holding yourself to any standards at all. Stop holding yourself.
I love that.
Come on, man.
Stop holding other Black people to these standards as well, because the amount of pressure that we are under trying to achieve these standards that, again, white people don't have to achieve, it's applying such a pressure that we see statistics right now that demonstrate how Black women are dying 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth.
Right.
And that's across both educational and economic strata. It doesn't matter how educated you are, how much money you have, you are 3 to 4 times more likely to die if you are a Black woman.
Right.
And that comes from the stress and pressure of just being Black in this environment. And so even as we're at this conference, the White Privilege Conference, other conferences I go to, and white people are here in attendance and they're talking about equity and anti-racism, all of it is predicated upon the white people's terms. We want equity, but we want it on terms of Eurocentricity.
Right.
We're not going to change the language orientation. We're not willing to shift white capitalism. We're not willing to shift the way that America's institutions work concerning non-white people, concerning Black people. We want Black people to be able to fit into this model. So the equity comes from us being able to require Black people. We want more representation, but we want Black people to still jump through hoops and perform for us so that they can fit into this model. And the equity and inclusion that we're talking about can only be found within the model of of Eurocentricity. And so when you ask, my dear sister, about how do we change, how do we relax as a community? How do we find our Blackness? We can never find our Blackness through Eurocentricity. And I don't believe that we have a model. We have to create that model of what it looks like to be Black outside of whiteness.
Wow. Powerful.
Because I also think about how we've been having like these conversations about like freedom and soft girl era and like, you know, Black boy joy, and this idea that we literally have to curate and create radical ways to just exist. Like we cannot just be. Right. And we have to, you know, almost have this reversed imposter syndrome where we have to pick a character as Black people and to figure out how we're going to show up in the world today. Like, am I going to be the happy Dante, or I'm going to be the radical Dante, or I'm just going to be like the around the way Dante today? And so I really appreciate how you break down how it's systemic, but also how we as individuals are uplifting these cultures of white supremacy. Because I just feel like, oh my God, yes. Like I can listen to you speak every day, all day, like all the time. And I really appreciate that. And I also do want to recognize the toll that it takes to do that, because I know you've been going viral, right? You've been getting some pushback. So can you just talk a little bit about what that has been for you and how you've been able to navigate this response?
You know, I'll say it was pretty riveting when it initially happened, because people were writing, you know, comments to me. I'm not sure if I can say it on here, but monkey this, or, you know, monkey faggot nigger, monkey nigger, go back to Africa. And again, it speaks to the hatred that's already there. Right. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I took screenshots of it, and I actually plan to publish many of the screenshots of messages that people sent to me in my next iteration of my next book. Wow. To really just kind of center how deep the hatred is that white people and others have towards Black people. And anytime we center Black people in a way that's positive, that's pro-Black, there's a lot of backlash from that. And again, that's due to the inherent nature of anti-Blackness in this culture. So I'm very aware. So it doesn't affect me so much because I expect white people to be crazy. I expect them to act out their delusion, whether it's extreme or subtle. And I don't expect anything less to be white in this place where we find ourselves in America is to inherently be anti-Black. And they are obsessed with oppressing Black people. They are obsessed with finding their value in how much more they believe they matter compared to other people. So I mean, I can't say much more. I just it didn't shock me in the way where I just couldn't believe it. I absolutely expected it, but I just didn't. I was kind of taken, maybe put off guard by the amount of messages that came through. There were hundreds.
I'm sure. I do have a question. You know, we're here in Oklahoma. We're in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're at the site of one of the most historic Black massacres we ever seen of like black people prospering, and that leading to like a white psychopathic, response to that, to that Black prospering, right? Black people enjoying their lives.
Yeah.
But we're also in a place where they just are they're breaking down, they're banning books. They're eliminating DEI. They're eliminating, they're actually trying to me, silence individuals like yourself on these college campuses. There was a report that if Donald Trump does get elected, that he plans to focus on, quote, anti-white racism.
Yes.
That's going to be the primary focus of his office. And so you, as somebody who speaks so directly, who speaks so strongly about these issues, how do you see, you navigating, or how are you navigating this current space where Texas shuts all the DI down, Kentucky does, Alabama does, right? Oklahoma does. How are you navigating just as an academic at this level?
That's a great question. I'm really just trying to take it day by day. I hope that he does not win.
Yeah.
Because it will compromise any and everyone that's doing this work. And the agenda that you just spoke to, with the America First Legal, which is Stephen Miller,
yes,
who is a right-wing supporter of Trump.
Yes.
He worked in his administration. But they've been bringing forth a number of lawsuits to go after things that provide not just affirmative action, but that help to try to achieve non-discriminatory outcomes. They've been going after, and they're trying to wipe all of those programs away. So we don't know what the future holds. But again, even just the example that you mentioned around white people banning books, that's a demonstration of their craziness. That
yes.
Anything doesn't align, that does not align with the white ideal or what white people think we should be learning,
right,
or that critiques their identity and critiques what they've done,
yes,
that it has to go. And that's part of the genocide, white people's genocide, of non-Black people.
It's interesting because you do see that, and we, Candace Owens was a victim of that. Very funnily. I'm just what I'm saying is
every time in a fight.
What I'm saying is you had basically this white man. As long as she was speaking on the white supremacy that he deemed and he was comfortable with, she was fine, right? It was about, and these are these free speech, non-censored warriors. But then the minute she spoke outside of that, she was immediately fired, by somebody who's supposedly not censoring anybody or doesn't believe in censorship. And so and if you look at the reaction to the video Dante talked about, that's the reaction, right? This is the speech that should be banned. This is what should be shut down. And that's really what they're doing. They don't want people talking about these subjects because you are waking folks up to the reality, and you're speaking the truth in such an unapologetic way, in such a strong way, comfortable with that tension, like Trouble mentioned. Well, we thank you again for taking time with us, Dante. We're going to put these videos out, you know what I'm saying? So hopefully, our audience supports you as well and the work that you do. Any final comments from the One Hood crew?
Can I make one more point?
Yes.
Just a brief point. It goes back to the idea that you use the word freedom. So to the example that you just gave regarding Candace Owens,
Yes.
in the ways in which white people control all of our life-giving, life-sustaining institutions, what then does it mean to be free in that environment?
Now these many years later, I am older, wiser, back in the saddle, riding an old war horse, searching for the fuel, for all the howls and whispers and songs that I might uncover while storming the barricade. This adds to that fuel. It empowers me in my search for the limitations of my art. And for that most precious of gifts, I thank you.
And I am here with
Such a great title.
right the legendary, one of the most influential poets of our time, and somebody, like I said, when I think of you, I think of Detroit. It's like, you know, inseparable.
Yeah.
The wonderful Jessica Care Moore.
Thank you, Jesse.
And you are somebody that has utilized your voice and your pen to speak to these issues that affect in our community. And I want to get into some of your work, but I do want to start with Detroit and Michigan, because it's been a focus in this national conversation. Primarily because it is the Arab population
Yes,
in
the
Michigan,
largest.
right? Dearborn was called by the Wall Street Journal
Seriously
America's
racist.
jihadist capital. I mean, how crazy is it?
Disgusting.
And mind you, this is in the time where we were watching violence on Arab and Palestinians just by being there. We saw 3 Palestinian men shot in Vermont, right?
Yes.
We saw this young boy in Illinois stabbed to death. And so here was the Wall Street Journal kind of throwing
Inciting
more fire.
violence.
Right, inciting violence. But at the same time, you see, you know, on the other side, right, you know, the Biden-Harris ticket trying to court, you know, the Arab American community. Iftar just got canceled, right? There's this whole thing around, you know, Michigan did this incredible, like, uncommitted campaign.
I was a part of that.
So, okay, so talk about
Yeah.
like how really post October 7th, how that's affected Detroit, and is there like a strong like Black Arab coalition? What's happening in Detroit, Michigan, Dearborn, where you said you grew up?
Yeah.
Can you just describe that experience right now?
So let me just say that, yeah. So I grew up on Tireman, and Tireman is literally the divide between Detroit and Dearborn. So I grew up in Detroit, but right across the street was Dearborn.
Got you.
And I went to a grade school for St. Alphonsus. St. Alphonsus is in Dearborn. So
Okay.
predominantly Polish. So I had to walk through like a Arab and Polish neighborhood to get to school. So
Wow.
predominantly white school, but Arab Chaldean. So I grew up knowing the difference between like a Muslim and a Chaldean.
Okay.
Like I knew that all Arabs weren't Muslim.
Right, right.
So this education that I had just from my environment completely guided me. Like when September 11th happened, we go all the way back to September 11th when World Trade Center got hit and everyone was calling them Muslims and we got to go kill them Arabs.
Right.
I'm talking about it's from the hip hop community. I was so
True.
disappointed the way we were talking about going to retaliate against people that I consider my own people.
Right.
So in Detroit, I always make a joke that everybody is Muslim. So whether you took your shahada or not, if you were part of hip hop in Detroit, then you were connected to Islam. So I've been connected to Islam my entire life. I've seen African American Muslim community is very rich there.
Right.
And the African American community is connected to the Arab. So the Sunni Muslims are a very big population in the city.
Right.
So that's where I saw myself, where I wasn't an Arab girl, I wasn't from Lebanon or Palestine, but the kids I played with in the park were.
Right.
But my black friends in college were all Sunni. Some of them were nation.
Yeah.
So I learned about the nation first because as an activist, when I was like 16, 17, going to college, it was a Farrakhan.
Absolutely.
It was nation time. It was the politics and blackness. But then Sunni Muslims, like I started learning about them, and so they're a connected community that has absolutely had issues.
Yes.
Like absolutely, like because a lot of the Arab community people own the liquor stores.
Yes.
Like things like that. So we had to work on race relations between the black community, which was predominant, even blacker than when I grew up in a very black city. Like I think we were 95% black when I was growing up.
Wow.
So and we're still like 85. We still there despite gentrification. So Black and Arab folks been connected. My mother was a part of the boycott in the 80s when they were trying to keep Detroiters, Black kids, out of the park. So Hemlock Park was the closest nice park to Detroit kids, closer to my neighborhood. So that was our park. And then they made it a thing where you had to have an ID to get in the pool.
Oh, shit.
So basically they're trying to keep Black kids out of the pools.
Yes.
Like this is like the 80s. This is definitely like 70s and early 80s. So that community is my community. And so when I see Palestine, I see my own people. I never understood. I had even a debate with a brother from Detroit who's an activist, who I understand, for Black folks, like we get so overlooked and our issues locally are real, like what's happening in our own neighborhoods. But I've been connected to the world in a way and traveled in the world in a way where you've even been to Palestine, where I've always wanted to go. But seeing myself as a part of the global conversation. So when I see brown and Black bodies and children being murdered, I see my children being murdered.
Absolutely.
I see my son, and I see the daughters that I've raised. And so our connection is deep. Rashida Tlaib and my son, and her son and my son have gone to school together since preschool.
And that's the congresswoman in Detroit.
On. She's a gangster.
And the only Palestinian in Congress that was censored.
Yes, she was.
Because of the language. And it was, we talked about on our last show, it was wild because you had the Michigan guy just come out and say use a nuclear bomb.
Yes, come on.
On Gaza.
Hurry up and get it over with.
Right. But then we
Nagasaki.
Just showing how differently that treatment is happening in the United States.
Yeah, she's necessary. And so people talk, that's why local for me, the federal, the presidency it's just a joke.
Right.
But local, that's keeping her voice alive.
Absolutely.
Is very important for Michigan. So it's we're connected. We're a connected community. I mean, she doesn't speak from a place. I don't see her and go, oh, there's I'm like, that's a Black woman. I look at her as a Black woman.
Right.
I don't see I don't make these big. I mean, we all culturally got different things.
Correct.
But brown, Black girl, and where your politics at? I used to say that even the good white working class activists, white people, blue collar in Detroit were Black too. I said
Absolutely.
they Black. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you live in a Black community, you should be voting Black community. Even if you white. I tell people, if you white and you live around Black people, then vote the conscience of the neighborhood.
Wow.
Get over your whiteness and vote the way that you should vote for your neighborhood.
We might have to steal that. Vote the consciousness of your neighborhood.
Yes. Well, that's what we with the census
Yes.
form. I told my white neighbors, I said, say you're Black on the census form. Because census form is about numbers. So you don't have to say you white. Who cares? A piece of fucking paper.
Absolutely. Come on.
Say you Black so that your neighborhood can get more resources.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
You
Come
know,
on, Jessica. Come with the. So you talked about. So was your upbringing conscious? And because clear, your poetry is fire.
Thank you.
But really like that connected to ancestral fire.
Yeah.
So I really see your work as connected to this long line.
Yes.
When you talk about like a James Baldwin or like a Langston Hughes, I mean, you
Yes.
come from that line.
Yeah.
So was that intentional, or and were you brought up to be like this firebrand and voice for your community and for Black women?
Thank you. Willie Perdomo calls me firebrand. Let me say, some of it is ancestor. It's spirit.
Yes.
It's spirit. So I had ancestors been with me for my whole life.
Absolutely.
I was raised very well by my daddy, Tom Moore, from Madison, Alabama.
Yes.
So did I grow up in a house where I had like Marcus Garvey on the walls and shit? Nah. Or Malcolm X on the wall. But I grew up very Black in a very a time when I grew up. I'm a Coleman A. Young baby, and if people know the history of Detroit,
yes,
there ain't nothing blacker than Coleman A. Young.
Yes.
So I grew up with Black mayors. Even though I went predominantly white, racist school, and I definitely got called, nigga, coming home. My brother had to go to the playground and threaten a fifth grader, don't talk to my sister again. So I think because my mother, who's not Black, who was born in Wolverhampton, England, raised in Canada,
wow,
allowed me to be a Black girl. I didn't impose because she was an American. I don't have any white American family members, so I'm very grateful for that because they be crazy. And so my family, my mother's side is Canadian, right? And so
yes,
so we were raised, and my daddy was a very dominant figure in my home. So I was raised very, very loud, Cadillac driving, Alabama proud, construction worker. You know what I'm saying? Go to work, boots on the ground. Construction had daddy, and so that's who made me. So no, not. But my daddy was self-made. It's my centennial birthday of my father is this year. So my daddy would be 100 years old if he was alive. So my grandparents are from the late 1800s, which means I am dangerous because I am literally one one generation away from all those things in the South. And so I carry my grandmother. I've never, Barry Lee Moore, Annie Mae Gillum. I love them. I feel them. I know them. Never met them. Yeah. And they're with me. And so the work of becoming this poet is through Detroit Public School and the library and my drama teacher who brought Ntozake Shange into the classroom. I was writing poems when I was like 9 or 10.
Wow.
About little dumb things, like nothing very deep. But I became radicalized just because I went to all white schools, and then I went to the all black Detroit public schools. And, I got treated one way at the white schools, and at the black schools, I talk very proper English, and then you talk like a white girl. So basketball and being a forward varsity letterman saved me from just, completely being strange. I was an awkward black girl. But my father's, I think, influence and seeing my daddy never work for white people, and that raised me. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. I can work with you. I can't work for you.
Got you.
And I realized that in my early 20s that my spirit was too big for these rooms. And but I'm well studied, so the Black Poets Anthology, Deli Randall, I found that in the library. But Ntozake's work for Color Girls in 11th grade made me go to the library, and I found Audre Lorde, and I found Sonia Sanchez, and my mother gave me Alice Walker, Maya Angelou. She gave me Lorraine Hansberry, Raisin in the Sun. I was a big reader young. Right. So and I read all memoirs and nonfiction. To this day, I don't really read fiction.
I'm the same way.
I like,
funny.
I like writing.
Real life is more interesting to me than
way more interesting
than fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, fiction's not my thing. And the fiction that was like people were into just wasn't my thing.
I agree.
And so my mother my mother used to say 8 books. So there were books in my house. So I was just a young reader, and I was flying through. And I'm a speed reader. I read really fast. So I was reading books, and then figure.
Were you reading them as fast as Cat Williams?
Oh my God. No, he's ridiculous. Yeah, he didn't read all them books. But I would argue that he had read like half the books in my personal library in my home would destroy whatever he read already. And so he's hilarious.
Yes.
But so reading got me to learn about poetry. Larry Neal. I was reading into Amiri Baraka and Hakeem Adabuti, and I was learning about the Black Arts Movement. Then I was, now I know I'm a daughter of Black Arts Movement, right?
Absolutely.
But nothing in school taught me this. So this is all, and I want that to change. I want to make it so that like the curriculum changes so that Black girls and all girls and people in general learning about poetry can find me faster, right? Not having to go, oh, wait, I'm in the library and look at all these Black women that nobody tells me they exist. So I feel like they're being kept from me.
Right.
But I knew spiritually there was a connection in my writing. Like when I heard Ntozake's, I was like, what's this gangster? People talking about gangster rap. I was like, I ain't never heard an MC more gangster than Ntozake Shange. I was like, the way she takes language and oh my God, it's magic.
Yes.
And so, but I mean, I'm a hip hop baby, so I was listening to like Run DMC and Public Enemy, and MC Lyte was everything, and Queen Latifah. So I had hip hop too. But yeah, I mean, being in a radicalized Detroit Black city, I think for sure shaped my voice and my fearlessness. You know what I mean? Like, cause I left Detroit. 94 and went to New York in 95 by myself. Went to Brooklyn by myself, and people like, you're not scared? I'm like, I ain't scared of nothing. My daddy died in 94. Yeah. And that propelled me. And so the poems had always been there. They came pouring out of me. And that's why I say a lot of it is spirit work. I mean, I won the Apollo 5 months after. I was still learning the train when I went on the Apollo and did Black Statue of Liberty the same way I would have done it any other time, and it changed my life.
Absolutely.
But I ain't scared of Black people. It's 125th Street. It's the Apollo Theater. I was like,
you're from Detroit.
What's wrong with you poets? Y'all see these Black people over here? They need these poems, right? And I was an organizer, though. I took over Wayne State University when I was there. I mean, that's all I did in school was organize. So I went to Michigan State freshman year and realized all these white students thought that I was only there because of affirmative action. Not because I was smart and I had a 3.5, not because I deserved to be there, but because I was Black only. And so that's what we started doing. My freshman year, I was 17 when I went to Michigan State. They made us $2 out of our tuition went to the State News, which is the state newspaper. The State News newspaper acted like the Black students on campus didn't exist. Wow. And so I organized with other Black students, and we went and got our $2 back. Where it seems like a very small thing, because nobody ever asked for that money back.
Give me my money back.
We went, organized, I'm talking about hundreds of us, and got our $2 back and started a Black newspaper called Focal Point.
Wow. So it's deep because you talk about that experience, and we're literally at a time where books are being banned, right?
It's crazy.
So that young person in the library won't be able to access certain things. Like, will they be able to access your work at this point because your work is very Black, very strong, very critical of American policy, very inclusive, and so like
we are needed more than ever. Educators are needed that are not sissies. Are needed more than ever.
So that going back to that, like our own schools and teaching, like we're really forced back. I did want to ask you, because I think one of the most fascinating things about you as a person, as an artist, is that you occupy a space and a balance that I feel like is rare, right? You're somebody who I would definitely describe as like a strong Black feminist, right?
Yeah, I'm not a feminist, but yeah.
Oh, you wouldn't describe yourself? I mean, because when you say like we want our bodies back.
Oh yeah.
Right?
I'm a womanist.
Okay. Break that down. What do you see as the difference between like feminist and womanist?
Well, feminism was built on the backs of Black women and white women.
Right.
It's a white women movement.
Yes.
And so it never was a movement that I felt included.
Right.
Well, it just hasn't historically. That's not what it's been.
Right.
I get feminism as an idea. Anyone's a feminist. Of course, I believe in women's rights and women's rights to vote.
Right.
Alice Walker and Bell Hooks, I love Bell Hooks and Alice Walker have been women that I've read since I was very young. And so when I heard the term womanism, it felt more like something I could get down with, and it includes brothers. And because I was raised by a Black man, and I have 5 now. I just found another brother actually, so I have 6 older brothers.
Wow.
And so because of I was and it's very patriarchal, I must admit. My home was, my mother's much more quiet than my father, and his presence dominated our homes. But my daddy was like my hero, and so growing, and then that's just real. That's a part of what I did, and I also have to deal with my own patriarchy because of that, to be honest. So I have to work past it. So I wouldn't say I was a feminist. Definitely a womanist, because Black men, for me, I'm a mother of sons. Yeah, they have to be a part of the conversation, and I want women's liberation, but I also want Black family liberation.
Absolutely.
And it could be gay Black family. Whatever Black family is, but the way that I see it, like, men are a part of the conversation, and I sometimes get into these. Like, I remember they didn't like me. I was at some conference years ago. I think actually Aja was there too. And the woman was talking about hip-hop feminism. And I was like, it feels like it's just oxymoron. Like, I don't always feel like those spaces are spaces where I don't know, the conversation is just, I was like, because hip-hop is so misogynistic. You know what I mean? Not all of it, but a lot of it is.
Yeah, most of it.
Yeah, and so like, how are we doing feminism and hip-hop? I guess we need new words. But womanism, to me, because I'm a mama, and I've been a wife a couple times, right? Yeah. So just nurturing that idea, because getting away from our Black men. I mean, I see how they try to destroy, like, my son King, like the memoir I will write one day. Yes. Called Raising King is about my struggles just trying to raise a Black free boy, right? Into a man in Detroit. I'm talking about in Detroit too. Yeah. I'm not talking about like some little hick town.
Right. We're not talking about like Alabama, like you said your pops was from. We're talking about in Detroit. Lord. And so you're saying even in Detroit, like a predominantly Black city, there were all of these things preventing or trying to stop your son from being like a free Black boy.
Yeah, well, we were like, at one time in Chicago, still has some, I believe Atlanta too. We used to be killing it on African-centered schools. We had Instrument Institute. We had Aisha Shule, Malcolm X, Grassroots Academy, Nataki Taliba. Our African-centered schools have been dismantled, right? True. And for all kinds of different reasons, right? Yes. If it's mishandling of money or organizational issues, whatever it is, we need to get back to our own schooling.
Absolutely.
Because that's what I would have put my baby. But there was no school like that to put King. And so I, went the private school route. Friends was okay. I pulled him out of there. The best experience he ever had was the homeschool we created. Wow. With 6 other kids and some parents that said, we're sick of this. And but when that homeschool stopped, here I am again trying to figure it out. He's in all these private institutions. Yeah, I mean, white women teachers, horrible. And even some of the one school that I called out, they probably can't stand me. I don't care. But UAD Jesuit, this is a predominantly, this is a UAD Jesuit is a school on 7 Mile in the middle of Detroit. 80% white kids, 20% Black. Wow, it's interesting. So a lot of the white kids are like coming in from the suburbs to come to this school on 7 Mile, which has a reputation of producing really affluent, lovely Black men. I happen to know some of them. Yeah. And they cool, and they have jobs, But, you know what I'm saying? They like the first thing they did with my son was say, you have to cut all your locks out of your hair. So this is before the Crown Act.
Wow.
And I mean, I'd already given my deposit. And I was like, you don't have to cut your hair. King had locks down to his waist at that point.
Right.
And I was like, no, you don't have to cut your hair. He said, Mommy, no, you have to. They're telling me. They didn't come to the mother. They let it circle around my child, who was only 11 years old at the time.
Wow.
So that was the beginning of the red flag where, Jessica, get your son away from these people.
Yeah.
But he wanted to go there, and he wanted to cut his locks at that time. And I said, I'm going straight to the news, King. He said, Mommy, I just want to go. Just let me go to the school. You know what I mean? I was like, no, we about to organize around it. And he was like, I just want to go to the school. So he said, it's okay, I want to cut my. So he cut his locks. But then it became a breaking down of his spirit. And he tells me now at 17 that he was depressed and almost he felt like sometimes even suicidal. This is like, I had to tell him, no. But that school is known for suicides, quiet ones. And so Chris Emden, who's one of my dear friends,
yes, hip-hop education.
Hip-hop education and racial equity, you know, and just common sense is Chris. And I wrote the foreword to his book, Ratchetdemic. And it's about my experience at this school and trying to find a way. Because I remember the vice principal, who's no longer there, came up to me and said, have you ever got King tested for ADHD or whatever, the stuff they love to put on our kids?
Yeah.
And I said, of course not, no, because he doesn't have that. He said, I said, he's just, he's full of life. He's alive. That's all. That's all you're seeing is freedom, and he's alive. That's all. Don't be overwhelmed, sir. You know, because you mad because your pants look funny and your tie is too tight and whatever wrong with you. Go take that back to your therapist.
Absolutely.
And leave my son out of it. And so that was like, this has been like the onslaught. And this is not a white man. And so this is So it's the institutions. It's not the color of the people. It's the institutions are built so that they want it. So it's not a bad school academically. It's great, but my son just wanted to play the piano in the lunchroom. You know what I mean? If you throwing a football, this is a good school for you. My son not throwing a football. He's a scholar in his own right, and he's free, and he questions. Yeah. I had to tell a sister, a black woman math teacher. We went to a meeting because King was not doing well in her class, and I said, "Sis, your energy is so high and I'm an adult and I can feel it. So I need you to like find a middle ground so that my 11-year-old isn't intimidated by you."
Right.
And then I want to just be like, you know, whatever boy did it, it wasn't my baby.
Right.
Like, stop taking out whatever boy you mad at, your boyfriend or whatever. It was not King.
I've had, it's so interesting as a father of a 12-year-old. I just had an experience where once I was able to talk to this teacher one-on-one. It kind of changed. But I had to take that time, you know, to talk to this teacher one-on-one because my son was like, I hate this teacher.
Right. Yeah. Listen, probably for good reason.
My son was like this, and felt like the teacher was unfair.
And probably like my sister would say, glaring at me, looking at me all funny. They do that.
Yeah, but again, there's a part like the last job I had was in Pittsburgh Public Schools, so I understand that. Like I was like, oh, like teachers are people, and they have favorites and not like the same. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time,
and biases.
And that's when I talked to her and explained more about my son, who they probably would say ADHD as well. But part of it was because my son is somebody who is very, very bright. She said he's never been challenged in this class. And so
they'd be bored.
Because of that, exactly. Because he's not challenged, he's not taking work as serious as they want. So that's really what it was. And so once we kind of had that conversation, but like you said, these schools can and sometimes will kill the desire. And I'm somebody that had that experience where because particularly university work were books that I was forced to read these 800-page books.
Right.
It made me not want to read until I found those works, not in school, but at those black bookstores and different places. And I was like, oh, I like this. I love this. I enjoy reading these things.
What a blessing. I'm not to cut you off, but what a blessing that she saw a black man, a black father, though.
Yeah, 1,000%.
I mean, King hasn't had that. So some of the attack is like because you don't think there's anybody that's gonna come up here and take care of you. But I had to threaten the vice principal.
Yeah, and you had to let them know, like, in Detroit, I got a little swag. Like, we'll have the whole hood.
Exactly.
At your front door.
I even talk about Pittsburgh and one hood, how they'll come. But just in Detroit, I was like, I had to let them know, like, I know the class of 89,
Yeah.
the 90s, 2000, all of them. I started naming all the names of the brothers that came out that school. Some of them that I've dated, some of them were just my boys. And I said, they got one thing in common. They love my son.
1,000%.
Yeah, he gone now. He went back to the Bronx.
Come on. So I did want to ask one last question because but I think you've kind of answered. You talked about this womanism because one of the things that is interesting about this moment, particularly with social media, is like cancel culture, right?
Yeah, I can't stand it.
And particularly coming at a lot of black men that and we're both friends and familiar with have been put on that, they're canceled for what they said or they have a difference of opinion. But I think one of the things that's happening now is the question of like, well, is there some type of way back?
Ground.
Do we just say like, hey, we saw this clip of you in 2002.
Yeah.
We can't entertain the 2024 version of you because of so how do you see
people
that?
Can't grow.
Right. So how do you see it, particularly as an artist that has works going way back? Clearly you've evolved artistically. So just how do you see that cancel culture moment and what is that road back to like redemption, particularly like as this kind of quote unquote like war on black men and women is kind of raised for like clicks on social media. Like how do we bring that back?
I don't engage in any.
Of course you don't.
Because I can't, and there's several people that I can name where I've had to kind of just take the L. And if I've lost people along the way, because there's just some men in my life that I love. Now, I'm not talking about, rapists, but I'm talking about, nothing serious like that. But just a lot of times people's opinion, one woman or man's opinion of you becomes the truth really fast.
True.
And then people talk about people and they don't know them in real life.
Yes.
And so, I can just say like Dave Chappelle is a good example of somebody who's taken hits because of his comedy specials and things that he says. Because I've known this man for such a long time and I know his heart.
Yes.
And so I can consider his heart. And I've been on panels where I was like, well, do y'all know, you ever talk to him?
Yes.
Do you know what his circle looks like? Are you sure? Because are you just basing this on whatever? It's because you're an outsider talking about a person that's in the limelight and it's an easy target.
Yes.
And then Talib Kweli, I just go to bat for him for the rest of my life. I mean, he's just one of the best men I've ever known. There's no way a man is perfect. Men are imperfect beings.
I'm certainly not.
Oh my God, they're not. Y'all are a mess. But it's important to be able to, I'm not perfect either. As a woman, I've made mistakes, right? And people can call me on whatever, Jessica, what about this? And I'm like, but I judge people on how I see them, how they treat me, and how I've interacted, and I watch their actions, and I see what they invest in and the love that they give. And I think that's it. We have to get away from like celebrity culture.
1,000%.
People are just groupied out.
Yes.
And then I don't know what's happening with Dick. I don't know Diddy well. Like that's horrific.
Yes.
So some things are just like, that's horrific.
Yeah, the feds have raided his house, right?
Yeah.
Feds ain't been to Yellow Springs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Let me just say this though, that men do need to heal.
Yes.
And that we talked about it in the car actually on the way over, is that there's men who have done harm that don't know they've done harm.
Correct.
And I think that men who are in power have to understand that there have been women around you that didn't feel as powerful as you, but they were around you because maybe they were searching for something, and that they made decisions not because they were using their intellect and their heart, because they were thinking, can I get out of this moment without taking off my clothes? And I'm talking about intelligent women. These are not just dumb girls. I'm a smart girl. I have definitely been in rooms where I'm like, Jessica, you got yourself in this room. How are you going to get out of here?
Right.
And had to figure out a ways to get safe. And so men have to reconcile with that, you know. But I've never been into like battle of the sexes and men versus women. I will call someone on their bullshit, but I will call if I have a male friend that I feel like is doing something shady, I'm going to call you.
Yes.
Jasiri, I'm going to call you on the phone.
1,000%.
And be like, let's have a conversation. And respectfully, you know.
And in my own growth, I'm thankful that women like yourself and Dream and Rosa Clemente called me on the phone and kind of checked, like, instead of embarrassing me online, which they could have.
Yeah, but no.
Called me directly and said, this is why the thing that you're on ain't it. And me having to reel that stuff back. Similarly to how early in my career as a rapper that came out of the 90s, the queer community had to come to me and say, this type of language ain't it.
This ain't it.
You know what I'm saying? And I had to say, oh, it ain't.
It ain't.
And let me evolve but those songs are still there.
Yeah.
You know, so
But
if
you
you want
learn,
to
right?
take, you know, you want to go find one of them, you can.
Yeah.
But to say like the person that I am now, and I always say is a black woman. I can't. I wish I remember this sister's name, but she said men are trash, but some can be compost.
Some can be
So I be trying to be compost out here. I know I'm trash, but I'm gonna try to be compost.
And we need the compost. It's good for the environment.
1,000%.
But I think there's balance.
Yes.
And just because I do know the attack on black men, and it's hard. You know, not that it's harder than it is being a black woman, because there's nothing really harder than that.
Yeah.
Because we deal with all the things. But because if we care about each other and we truly love each other, and we don't, I don't want to be battling with brothers. And I've
100%.
seen, and some of them say some really horrible, very sexist things online. And I be seeing the misogyny. I be like, you know, I put my little 2 cents in, but I'm not about to go in.
Yes. So the last thing.
Yeah.
Talk about more press.
Black press.
More black press. You have your own publishing company. You just published your first book.
Yeah.
Just talk about that and where we can support, where we can find more books, and just support your work in general.
So more black press. So just to be clear, so I published Saul Williams' first book. I published Raz Baraka's book. I published Danny Simmons' book. Asha Bandeli's book.
Wow,
so it's not
you
my
naming
first book.
you naming the legend. Okay, I thought you told me that was your
first one. So I now more black press is more black press HarperCollins.
Okay, got you.
I got a bossy distribution deal.
Yes,
you know?
come on, yeah, flex on them.
I mean, it's a little distribution. It's good. It's not. It's actually a really big deal. And so shout out to my agent, Regina Brooks. You know, we decided my book, We Want Our Bodies Back, came out during the pandemic, which is a hard time to have a book come out, but it still did very well. So the publisher, HarperCollins, had a meeting with me, and we said, you know, we were interested in maybe pushing the press, the thing I've been doing. Let me try to. I never wanted to be an imprint. Let me just say that. I wanted to be a black press that didn't have white distribution.
Yes.
But distribution in films and books and everything is still very hard.
Yes.
And I just don't have the time to go to the post office. So at this point in my life, this, what I call the beginning, with my son going to college and me building my legacy as a publisher since 1997. Brad Walron would be my first author on the press. We've got... I am working on contracts with 2 or 3 other people, so I can't say their names yet, but I hope to be one of the larger, and if not the largest voice for black poets in the country. And that's and I've been doing that work independently for a very long time.
Absolutely.
And then Black Women Rock is my 20th anniversary. So, you know, I believe in building institutions. I'm not I'm not an entrepreneur or whatever, definitely not a capitalist. I don't care about money, but I care about building institutions and things that I can take, I can create and pass on. And so it'll be here when I'm gone.
So thank you for taking time to be with us.
I love it. I'm so excited I got to be here. Shout out to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Come on.
And Black
Tulsa.
Wall
Come
Street.
on,
I'm on my way to Black Wall Street right now.
Absolutely. And the ancestors are speaking to us here in Tulsa and demanding that we do more.
That's right.
Huh?
MOOR.
Yes. So thank you, the legendary Jessica Care Moore, for being with us at This Week in White Supremacy. So we'll see y'all next time. Peace, y'all. One hood. We are black creatives and cultural organizers dedicated to liberation for all.
We make change through our 5 pillars of engagement: arts and culture, education, media, civic engagement, and cultural organizing.
Our civic engagement and cultural organizing work activate traditionally marginalized and excluded individuals to lift their voices toward creating a truly reflective democracy.
Now more than ever, we need to work together.
We support black artists to make sure their lived experience is part of the cultural narrative.
We don't know what the next years will bring, but we're ready to meet the challenge.
Your support has never been more important.
We love you, One Hood.
Thank you.
We must act as one hood.
Now is the time.